So DC Comics killed Nightwing, sorta kinda. We're about to take a look at a very meta tale that some may find amusing, others annoying, others may not care. We're gonna be looking at DC's special issue, I Know What You Did Last Crisis, which is a bit of an interesting choice for an anthology. This anthology is little pieces, additional stories, codas, or in the Nightwing story's case, a tongue-in-cheek catharsis moment. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and Dan Didio got to kill Nightwing. Again, and again, and again. This one has some deep lore to unpack. So let's start with just what is the whole I Know What You Did Last Crisis anthology. It's an 8-story anthology that DC described as having 8 chilling tales set during the events of Crises past. This is why it was released in spooky month of 2024, time of recording. And all of the stories take place around some crisis point. So this anthology is geared towards those who enjoy or have kept up with the various continuities. Basically all of them. So it's definitely niched down. There's a very specific type of fan this is targeting. But if you are into that, it has its appeal, since the various sections do approximate the art styles of the times. The one that really stands out is the Birds of Prey story that has art by Jose Luis, and his art still looks absolutely gorgeous. But we're not here for a lovingly drawn Black Canary and scary ghost Oliver Queen. We're here for the 5th story, Crisis Obscura, written by Dan Didio, the former co-publisher at DC Comics. At the time of the crisis he's referencing in this story, which would have been Infinite Crisis, he would have been the vice president and executive editor. Now for the lore. Infinite Crisis was a 2005-2006 comic event. It was a sequel and undoing of Crisis on Infinite Earths. This in the sense that it reinstated the previously collapsed multiverse. So in Crisis in 1985, DC had collapsed its multiple Earths into one Earth to simplify continuity, which in some cases it did, in other cases it didn't. Sorry, Power Girl. And then Infinite Crisis, which was written by Jeff Johns, reopened it. Side note, Wonder Woman has a big sword on the cover of one of these. It's an iconic cover. I just noted at time of recording because Absolute Wonder Woman is coming out with the giant great sword, but that is not the first time she's had a big sword. It just made me think of her past sword-faring days. That one's still pretty big, but Wonder Woman's sword is not what people tend to remember about Infinite Crisis. One of the more well-known stories surrounding this event for people who are in the know is that Nightwing was supposed to die during Infinite Crisis. When Bloodhaven got nuked by Chemo, he was supposed to be there. And then Jason was going to become Nightwing. It was a whole thing. They really had to pivot when he stayed alive. And this isn't just something that is hearsay. Dan Didio has talked about this multiple times. There were interviews at the time, after. Let's work our way backwards, starting in 2020. In 2020, he stated, "For me with Dick Grayson, the issue wasn't about the fact that I didn't like the character. In fact, when I said we should kill Dick Grayson, it was purely story-driven." This is also addressing the idea that has circulated for years that Dan Didio hates legacy characters, specifically Nightwing and Wally West. There's the infamous tale about how when they were discussing this, he wrote in a napkin that they had to kill both of those characters. And the reason people think this is because there are discussions about him talking about Nightwing in particular, not really understanding what the purpose of his character was. What is it he does there exactly? In 2006, he stated, "We were looking for the big death in Infinite Crisis, the big moment. We were looking for something that would equal import and merit and weight in this story. One of the things I've been proven wrong about is that I had felt that Dick Grayson was a redundant character. Tim Drake had filled his role as Robin, he would never be Batman, so where could he go? My big fear was that Nightwing would get older than Batman. The thought was that if we removed Dick from the equation, that would allow Bruce Wayne to stand alone as Batman and to firmly establish Tim Drake as Robin. So now Marv is showing us why we like him, his place in the DC universe, and more importantly, his potential in the DC universe." And those two, they're not the only time. This has come up in between, so you get to see the evolution of the opinion, or at least the public opinion. In 2009, in Red Robin #1, we have a whole page dedicated to how he's come to view Nightwing. Because also, this is now Tim taking on a new mantle, moving on from being Robin. Because now we have Damian. A lot of it is how he now feels that Nightwing is the successor to Batman, so it still doesn't look like it's moved away from the idea that Nightwing can't just be Nightwing. I will read a little snippet of it. "When I first admitted that we had planned to kill Dick Grayson back in the days of Infinite Crisis, the outcry of support from the fans for the character was loud and strong. In speaking with many of you over the years, including the airport baggage handler who held my luggage hostage in exchange for Dick's safety, it became clear that one of the things Nightwing was most loved for was his ability to grow and change with them." I hope that that baggage carrier story is hyperbole, because if not, that's a bit disturbing. Pretty intense and inappropriate if that happened. I like Nightwing too. I'm really glad he lived, but boundaries. The point to all of this is that this moment was a bit of a touchstone in comics. And because we have all these snippets and interviews and the like, not only does it live on, but it's an interesting way to track Didio's thoughts on the matter, or as mentioned, the public record of the matter. The story we're about to look at is potentially an interesting window into that. I'm curious to see whether you think it's in good fun or petty. So let's look at Crisis Obscura, written by Dan Didio, with art by NL Sinapo, colors Hi-Fi. Also, while background knowledge of these crises it ranges from an asset to a necessity, there are editor's notes that show which one each of these stories is referencing. So at least there's that. Now this story opens on All Hallows Eve. Dick is seeing a disturbance that Oracle isn't, and despite her warnings, he decides to pursue it. He ends up inside of a warehouse and in front of these odd kind of shards, some kind of multiversal shards. They're described as shards of reality, and there's someone off panel monologuing at him dramatically. But then again, I'm not sure what reality is anymore. It changes so quickly and so often. Who are you? These shards capture every moment, every event. They have been known to stop change and bring it about. So be careful not to punch the glass. That's a Superboy Prime reference because in Infinite Crisis, he punched the wall of reality, and that was the explanation given for certain continuity changes going forward. The most famous of them is the resurrection of Jason Todd. Now, this speech and the imagery of the legendary beatdown of Superboy Prime being shown prompt Dick to remember which crisis this was. It should have been the end of your world. Instead, it was the end of mine. This was getting so meta that when they had the character remove the hood, I was almost expecting it to be a beardless Dan Didio. But no, it's not. It's Superboy, Connor Kent, t-shirt edition. And he was the character who died in Infinite Crisis, instead of Dick. Now, Connor isn't here for vengeance, he claims, which makes sense since he got better. But instead, he says he's here to set things right. It was ordained that your death would unite all heroes, allowing Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman to step aside and let others rise to take their place. This decision would end all crises as the universe would stop resetting around them. The universe would be allowed to heal, bringing about the one true golden age. Yet somehow, whether it was fate or the powers that be who intervened, you survived. And I died in your place. And if you haven't noticed, I'm still very much alive. So where does that leave us? The idea that if Nightwing had died, it would have ushered in a new golden age for legacy characters is a fascinating one. I'm very curious how much of this is in-story rationale, that being it's Connor's reasoning, versus authorial projection. The response, the universe was going to keep trying to kill you, hoping to bring this endless string of crises and destruction to a close. Problem is, you just won't die. A Stealth Rick Grayson reference. Dick tries to convince Connor that this is a good thing because he's just relentlessly cheerful in this, to the point of being obnoxious. He tries to tell Connor that nobody needs to die, and that's wonderful. But Connor is not deterred. How can you be sure this is the right answer? Who's to say what worlds should live and which should die? No one person should have that much power. We should create our own futures. Long live the king vibes from Connor looming there. And Nightwing plummets to his death. But this story goes harder than a distraught Batman sobbing over his son's corpse. No, Connor set Nightwing's death on a loop so he can die again and again and again. You will continue to die and continue to die in every known dimension, multiverse, and timeline. I had to be sure that no one could ever step in and undo what I've done. Death will come to you in so many different ways. Not the fate you deserve, but the one I desperately need. And then Cassie turns the lights on and he's in the basement because our ending reveals that the universe has changed. Connor is with Cassie and he keeps these shards of reality of Nightwing just being killed over and over in his basement, covered up. That's really something she should check out. Unless it's some kind of art project that needs to dry, you should probably look at it. Cassie jokingly refers to this area as his fortress of solitude, and Connor then proceeds to be a sociopath. Why do you torment yourself? Everyone knows what happened that day. You have to let it go. I guess it's Survivor's Guild. We were there and somehow I feel responsible, like it should have been me and not him. I mean, unless he doesn't remember doing it, but he totally does because he was looking at the shards and he was giving a villain speech. Unless he forgot because the universe has changed and it overrode his mind. If so, that's horrific in a different way. Also, I like that him and Cassie are repping their own merch. Cassie even says that their costumes are just symbols now because there's just that much peace. There's also a bit of a line here where it's implied that Connor did this just so he could be with Cassie. I guess he really never got over that her and Tim thing. And the ultimate ending, a bit of dark humor. Whenever I think of the sacrifices made, I can't help but think of Nightwing. He loved life, but rarely had a life of his own. All he ever wanted was to be a hero, and Dick Grayson died a hero's death. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's time we finally move on. Let's stay with the positive. Remember how his dying helped deliver a better world. Okay, I will admit, I chuckled at the chemo one. The oop, since that was the intended death. Overall, these are brutal though. His head being knocked off, his face being burnt off with fire. I guess the acid would have been too much. All of this while the story is saying what a positive force he was. It's a lot of a lot, and potentially a strong Miles Varies moment. It's possible to read this a bit as a meta, tongue-in-cheek, something poking fun at Didio's purportedly strong desire to kill Nightwing. This time, I'll kill him all the ways, because it's the only time vibes. The question that some might come away with is the tone. Is it more lighthearted and playful? Because on the other hand, some may read this as petty and a whole story of why did no one get why this was a good idea, and then maybe some salt behind the brutality of Nightwing's deaths. I'm really curious as to how this landed for you. For me, it was fascinating because of the meta relationship that Dan Didio has with this moment and with the Nightwing character and just the evolution of it over time. This is certainly not a tale I expected to see the in-story rationale, which is so at odds with the original explanations at the time, but potentially may have been a changed view over time, or perhaps it's just entirely a story. An imaginary tale, for aren't they all? It certainly had a bit of a darker humor element running through it. Personally, to me, it didn't seem overly mean-spirited, at the most a bit salty. Some salt, some seasoning, the spice of life, but again, mileage may vary. I can see reading this and finding it insulting, not funny, cruel, or a tearing down of a focal character who really has grown into his own place. It was certainly a very interesting, my favorite word this video, narrative. A little morbid what if, but all of these are just my thoughts and I want to hear yours. What did you think of this story? Did you think it was funny? Did you think it was petty? Did you think it was meh? Do you think that Nightwing should have died during Infinite Crisis? I want to hear all your thoughts. Please put them down below. And while you're down there, please do all the YouTube things like, share, subscribe, hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate Alvin. After. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day. Alvin! No! Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye. Look who wanted to come on and say hi. You like an alive Nightwing? Yeah, me too. I like Nightwing alive too. We're pro Nightwing here. Alright. Bye.